Hello and welcome at Book Lovers Companion. My name is Edith and right next to me is my lovely co-host, the Chattering Teacup.
Hello.
And here with us, from rainy Scotland, returning guest Rosie Walker. Hello Rosie and welcome back on the show.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I loved being on the show last time. I'm so pleased to be back.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you back, and we're going to talk about your fresh from the press new book, The Baby Monitor. It came out at the beginning, 1st of February 2024. Rosie, what can you tell us about this scary psychological thriller?
I can tell you that it's available in ebook, in paperback, and in audiobook. My publisher is Bookcompanioncontact, and I can read you the blurb if you'd like to hear it.
Oh yes, please do so.
I'm closing my daughter's bedroom door after putting her to bed and saying I love her one last time when I hear the baby monitor crackle to life. The voice sends shockwaves to my core. Your mother doesn't love you. My husband says it's just exhaustion and I'm hearing things, but he has no idea what that voice is doing to Olivia. He doesn't see the look in my daughter's eyes as she pushes me away and says, I want my other mother. Then Olivia plunges down the stairs screaming. In my worst nightmares, I never imagined I could come so close to losing my child. As I watch Olivia sleep in a hospital bed, her broken arm in a sling, I decide this has to stop. Someone unscrewed our baby gate from the wall. I know I've been unwell in the past, but I'm not making this up. The only people who've been inside our house are the ones I thought I could trust. Someone close is watching me, speaking to Olivia and trying to make me look like a bad parent. I don't care what my husband says. I am more scared than I've ever been in my life, but my precious child means everything to me. They have no idea how far I'll go to protect my daughter.
There is a lot of scary things packed into this book, Teacup. You mentioned it before.
Yeah, it's a book about fears, or at least insecurities, in all different directions one can have in one's everyday life and in one's family and friends.
As a mother yourself, how easy or how hard was it putting all those scary little tidbits in the book?
I think it's a really good question. And I think when I first got the idea for this book and started to plan it, I wasn't a mother yet. I was pregnant, and I was writing it while I was pregnant, and it got to the point where I had written as much as I thought I could without kind of knowing what it felt like to be a mum. And then when I had my daughter, suddenly the floodgates opened on all of the fears that parents can have. And all of the different ways all of the different things that you imagine happening to your child every moment of the day, and that your brain's kind of like giving you these ideas so that you can subconsciously protect your child against them all the time. And like, I know that people say that having a child is like your heart is outside of your body and it's walking around in the world, and that's terrifying in itself. And I understood that, but I don't think I really grasped quite what that felt like until I had a child. And so it was useful to kind of put all of those fears into Miriam and into the book, and kind of turn up the volume on all of them and kind of make them all kind of a lot worse than anybody hopefully would ever experience in real life. But yeah, it was definitely very interesting to go through pregnancy and then like the first year of my daughter's life while writing this book.
And did it help to calm your own fears, writing down all the fears?
Or did it enhance them?
Yeah.
It didn't calm them down, but it also didn't enhance them. I think Miriam, the things that Miriam's afraid of are not things that could happen, that they're like not likely to happen in real life. So my husband's a very nice man. He isn't going to send me off anywhere and isn't accusing me of anything. And I like so there was kind of it was interesting to put myself in Miriam's shoes, but her fears were not the same as my fears. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does indeed. Because Miriam had depression after her first child. So she comes home with her second child, Samuel, and all these strange things start to happen. She's afraid it might happen again. That's what I grasp from the way she talks about her fears and in an inner monologue. Also the way her husband behaved. I mean, it was a sort of anxiety on both their sides. he was afraid it might happen again. She was afraid it might happen again. And she wants to do right by him and by her children. And then, like you said, and like you read in the blurb of your book, strange things start to happen. This baby monitor, I mean, it's the title also of your book. It gives you pause, doesn't it? Baby monitors we know, or we knew about, were always in the past one way. You could listen to your child, but there wasn't something in the way of talking to your child. The early ones,
and nothing connected to the internet or anything like that. It's just because within a house.
It wasn't possible. Did you research on such things? Do they happen? Did they happen? Get they hacked by people from outside?
So I got the idea reading about cases like this. I found news stories of families who had their baby monitors hacked. They were Wi-Fi video monitors, so that you're able to kind of log on to and tap into your baby monitor through an app on your phone or on your computer. So even while you're at work, for instance, if you're the working parent and your other parent is at home, you can still kind of check up on your child. So I'd looked up the monitors and seen these news stories, and some of the news stories even had recordings from those apps where you could hear a voice speaking to the child in the room, and that these people had managed to record what had happened to them. And so, that was kind of part of the inspiration for it. Was not my own use of the baby monitors, but was people's experiences. And then I was kind of chewing over this idea in my mind, and well before we had a baby monitor, I think. And I was following a parent, like an influencer on Instagram, and she had said something about baby monitors, and I knew that she had quite a lot of followers and that she must have kind of talked to quite a lot of parents, and I asked her, have you heard about this hacking? Has it happened to anybody that you know? And like in the book, almost word for word, she got back to me almost straight away and told me that it wasn't real, and that people were making it up. No one was hacking baby monitors, and that the rumors of the hacking were dangerous because they were causing parents to turn off their baby monitors and not use them, and that was too dangerous, and I should stop asking those questions. And but I'd seen the footage in these news stories, and I knew it was true. And I was just like, well, how would you feel if that had happened to you, and if you were kind of doubting it, and somebody who you kind of saw as an influencer, somebody of influence, kind of just told you, nah, it's not real. And that kind of really spiraled me into the idea a little bit more. And then when we had our baby, I was really careful about what baby monitor we used because of the research that I'd done into it. And we've got one. We do have a video monitor, which I think is really good, and you can kind of see what's happening in the room in night vision. And you can also, there's a little intercom button, so you can talk to them if you need to. And but nobody from outside of the camera unit and the parent unit, nobody can get into that, because I kind of was so cautious about that kind of thing. But we have used, like if we've been on holiday or borrowed them from someone, we've used Wi-Fi cameras, and I do find them really creepy. Like if you're in the room and somebody outside of the room kind of switches on the camera, you can hear like the click of the lens opening and see like this ring of lights light up around the camera lens, and then you can almost, like, sometimes if they want to move the camera, you can watch it like swiveling on its stand as it scans the room. And that, like, can you imagine if there was nobody else in the house and you didn't think anyone else could have access to that camera, and suddenly the camera's like so that all those things kind of came together, and I was just like, this has to be a book. This is super creepy.
It is indeed. And also the mentioning of the smart home, when Miriam more or less surprisingly is being told, oh, you're living in a smart home. I'm living in a smart home. How is that possible? I didn't even know that. Appliances get switched on and off and so on. I mean, is that also something that happened? Did you also research that intensively? Because there is this other network you mentioned in the book while she was getting to the bottom of this whole affair. And Julia says, oh, there's another network. What do you mean there's another network in my home? I have one network, I have one internet network, and there's suddenly another one?
I did research that, because I was trying to work out how she wouldn't have noticed, like and so I managed to find, just by poking around online and kind of asking the right questions to Google, to find out how somebody could hide that kind of thing and how somebody could set it up as well. And like the instructions that are available online just from a quick Google are really simple, and like somebody could do it. So they don't have to be a tech wizard. Similarly, like you don't have to buy an upgraded smart appliance. You can just buy something that you plug your appliance into and then into the wall, that either can then control it remotely via an app, like on or off, for instance, without having to kind of buy a whole new fridge or a whole new oven or things like that. So I haven't experienced myself like any of the smart home things that were in the book. But I believe that they exist and that you can access them.
It makes you think about all these new toys and appliances using AI and the internet. Makes you think if you really want to buy this stuff.
Definitely. And things like Alexa as well, like, and people talking about what it's listening to. And I'm sure loads of people have done that thing where you like around your phone, just completely like inactive, switched off, whatever, and you say things into the speaker, and then a couple of hours later, suddenly the ads that you're getting are similar to what has been said around your phone, even though everything you thought was shut down. And like there's a lot going on with tech. And when you Google that as well, there's a lot of places that say that doesn't exist and that's not real.
Yeah, but it is in a way, isn't it? I mean, that's something we spoke about, Teacup, because the ads are always like, oh, it's so to your advantage having the smartphone. You can switch on the oven while you're on your way. Yeah, but there's nothing in it. Why would I switch it on? And suppose... and suppose I'm ending up in a traffic jam or a public transport gets in a pickle or something. So the oven is heating up, and so then what?
In this case, I always worry about a malfunction, because usually the people, if something happens, they tell you shouldn't turn it on and leave it alone. But what the smart home people tell you is turn it on while you're not at home. So it's a bit of a contradiction.
Yeah,
it's true. And like there's a bit in the book where Miriam's heating system gets really out of control, and it gets hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter in her house, and she doesn't know how to fix it. And that does actually happen in my house because we have this thermostat that connects to the boiler remotely, and if the connection is lost between the thermostat and the boiler, then for some reason the boiler's default is just to switch on to full heat and just like blast heat out until it gets the connection again. So I've often, like, one time I woke up in the middle of the night in July and I was like, why am I so hot? And it was because the batteries have run out in the thermostat and the heat in the boiler had just like come on. And so that kind of like technology is very fallible in that way. And so that was something I drew upon vaguely for the book, when Miriam's like overheating in her house, and the bit where the boiler that she's using, they've replaced the kind of innards of the boiler to make it a smart boiler, but the front is still on it, so it just looks like a normal boiler. That's what our boiler looks like as well. We've got this little panel that's just like a false panel that looks like the normal one that you can just switch everything, but it does nothing because it's not connected. So you can do.
Technology, it's getting scarier and scarier by the day.
The more technology there is, the more possibilities are for something to go wrong.
Exactly. Imagine it's the same with cars. I mean, a completely electric car like those Teslas and so on, and someone can hijack you on, let's say, in the motorway.
Didn't even talk about someone abusing it.
Yeah, I know. Just the normal malfunction is scary enough. But aside from the technology, there are other parts, other ideas you put in the book that also makes you question your relationships. Your relationships with
outside
your friends,
family.
Outside the family, yeah. With your friends, makes you wonder, friends?
Who do you really know?
Who are they in reality?
Yes, and who can you trust?
Exactly.
And if they're even if they believe they're trying to help you, is what they're doing helpful? Or is it actually like the work of somebody else pulling the strings behind them and they don't even realize, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, also in the home, her relationship with her husband is a bit on the, let's see,
Not optimal.
downhill a little bit during the course of the book. I mean, I do get where he comes from in a way. When he is worried about her getting depressed again and how she reacts, and he doesn't believe her. I mean, on the one hand, like I said, I do get where he comes from. He's scared himself, and he has this new job. He's away from home a lot, but still, he doesn't listen to her. Is it salvageable? I mean, in the end, one wonders.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's two ways to view what Jeremy's doing through the book without giving any spoilers away. But like, is he is he looking out for her, and is it just like misplaced concern? Is he kind of is he acting before he's thinking, or before and trying to kind of take over without consulting her? Or is he bad? Is he doing something that requires him to completely disregard how she feels because he's not on her side?
Yeah, exactly. And we also learn a little bit about both the backgrounds when he has experience with social workers or being in care. On the one hand, there is no immediate family on his side, but also Miriam's family. I mean, her mother is getting back her youth in a way, sort of.
Relive it.
Yeah, she's trying to get it back in a way. Not the motherly type. And like we said before, I mean, the friendship, you come to question your own friendships when you read the book.
It's nice that, like, I think in a lot of books, particularly psychological thrillers, I think sometimes the main characters are quite isolated. And so often that's because of the plot and because of the setting. But sometimes that's also because their friends haven't been written into the story. And I think for it to be kind of, I wanted Miriam to have friends, because most people have a handful of good friends that you would involve in these scenarios. And I think it's important that they're present and that you see Miriam kind of considering who she should talk to, who she can trust, whether she can confide in them or whether that's just going to get her into more trouble, because she's seen her husband, like, presumably trying to help her, but it's all completely going in the wrong direction. And like, if he believes he's got her best interests in mind, what about her friends who also will believe that they have her best interests in mind, but they could do something just with good intentions that's just as destructive. And so they kind of, so I wanted her to feel like she had people, but also that she kind of had to isolate herself at the same time to protect herself, potentially.
And also the question of having depression after having a child. How very common is it really? Do you have any ideas how common it is with new mothers?
I think postnatal depression, I think, is very common. I don't know the statistics, but I believe it's something around like 3 in 10, maybe even higher. What Miriam has had with her previous baby was postnatal psychosis, which is rarer and a lot more serious, and involves delusions and can lead to some quite dangerous behavior because of those delusions in many cases. And so she genuinely was very, very mentally ill in the aftermath of the birth of her first child, and had to be taken to inpatient psychiatry care. And I think what's driving their behavior, both Miriam and Jeremy, in the aftermath of the birth of their second child, is this intense fear that it might happen again. And I think anyone that has experienced mental health issues can kind of attest to the fact that in a lot of cases, you don't know it's happening if you're in it. You know, you can't see it clearly, and you can't trust your perception of your own mental state or of what's happening around you, because you don't know whether it's colored by this what you're going through in your head. And that was something that I really found fascinating and kind of did want to write about, was like, I have experience with depression, postnatal depression, and just normal depression. And the way I've described it in the past is that it's a bit like looking at the world through a stained glass window, and everything that you see is the color of the glass, and you don't know really what it looks like when that window's not there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what I was exploring with Miriam, is like what's real for her and what's not, and what's mental illness and what's really happening. And if somebody is doing this to her, do they know that? Are they playing with that? Are they using that? And how scary that would be if that happened.
Do you know how serious postnatal depression is taken in general by family and friends?
That's a good question. You mean like, I think it probably depends from case to case. I think in my experience, I didn't want to talk about it. And like, I didn't ever, until I was kind of getting onto the other side of it, I didn't ever sit down and say, I don't think I'm okay. And I wasn't able to say that until I could say, I don't think I was okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes people aren't able to communicate what's happening because they can't see it clearly themselves. And so in my case, I don't think my family and friends had a chance to take it seriously because I didn't want to give it to them. And I wonder how many people are going through that quietly and not being able to talk about it. And I hope that books like this give people the language to talk about it a bit, and or even like being able to, and me talking about it on a podcast, for instance, maybe one person out there will think, well, it's okay to talk about it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you say it's quite often that it happens, and I had the impression that it's something that's very rare, to be honest. I mean, we know it exists, but you think it's just a few people.
Yeah.
I think it's hard because like having a baby is such a life-changing experience in itself, and also all the hormonal changes after having a baby. It's very hard to tell what's normal and what's kind of what they call baby blues, you know, where your mood dips significantly after birth, is very, very normal. But then when does that normal become an abnormal? You know, how long you have to wait feeling like this before it moves into a different category of mental health.
It probably is more difficult to realize because when you get back home, your life is completely turned around. It's not as it was before with a baby in the house. So.
Totally. And like I said before, the fears of kind of how can I look after this small person? How have they let me go home from the hospital looking after this person? Like, there was a lot of that for me. It was just like, I have to keep this person alive, and I have no idea how to do it. That's terrifying.
So much responsibility.
Yeah.
So much that can happen.
Exactly. But with this kind of depression, is there a way to help people in a way with medication, or not at all? Or is it, what kind of therapy or help is there out there?
For postnatal depression, I think it can be a bit tricky with women who are breastfeeding because the medications that you take can move into the breast milk. I believe there are medications that you can take while breastfeeding. And I think they also recommend cognitive behavioral therapy. But in countries like the UK, there's often quite a long waiting list for that kind of thing. So yeah, I don't know because I didn't seek treatment myself. And then with postnatal psychosis, I think the treatments are a lot more serious. I believe that there would be antipsychotic medication and a lot of therapy and things like that.
Do you know? Have you read about it? Maybe is there a previous underlying mental problem? Maybe also the cause for psychosis after birth, or does it just happen? Or could it happen with anyone?
I think both. I think there can be a predisposition to it if you've had other mental health difficulties in the past, but it can happen completely out of nowhere. There's a really, really good memoir called Inferno by Catherine Cho. She's a literary agent in New York, and her memoir is about her experience with postnatal psychosis. And she, I think her baby was about 3 months old, and she was doing okay. And her and her husband, who I believe at the time lived in London, they went on a trip with their newborn to New York, and they were also in New York and around America visiting different relatives to let them meet the baby and things. And the intensity of the journey and kind of staying in other people's houses and like constantly visiting with family and friends and like having absolutely no downtime while simultaneously looking after a 3-month-old, caused her to have to just completely descend into a postnatal psychosis. So triggered like 3 months after birth. So it didn't happen straight away. And I don't believe she had any previous mental health difficulties that I can remember. And the delusions that she experienced were so intense. She believed that her son was the devil and things like that. And I think that eventually she ended up telling somebody because she was afraid that she might hurt her son. And she ended up in inpatient mental health facilities in the US to recover for a long, long time.
Poor.
But it sounds like a lot of stress has brought it on.
I think it can do.
I mean, I was also wondering about how easy it is to book someone into a, well, let's not call it mental institution. Let's call it a sort of mental spa.
Yeah.
To get the rest you need and reflect on things. How easy or how hard would that be in reality? Because in your book, it seems fairly easy. Oh, I've booked you in for 2 weeks and you can relax and so on. Is it that easy?
I mean, how much does it depend on what the institution or resort calls itself?
That's a good question too. So I researched how to get someone sectioned for the book. And in the UK, it is quite complicated. And I don't believe that Jeremy could have got Miriam legitimately sectioned by the NHS. So I bypassed that by making it a private health spa, as you like, is a retreat, which generally means that there are no rules and there's kind of no, as long as you're paying money. This is my made up spa. This is in my made up health retreat. As long as you're paying enough money, they can send anyone there, basically. And everything else, all of the kind of things that she's told about how you get out and how long you have to stay and things like that is very ambiguous and often is a little bit like a rumor from other patients in the spa. And I put that in purposefully because I wanted it to Miriam to be very ambiguous and the ambiguity to be the scary part of it. So I suspect in real life, if I suspect that it would be quite difficult to get someone put in one of those things and probably very easy for them to get out. But in the book, because I invented a spa, it's ambiguous.
Which is absolutely perfectly fine, I think. Coming back to the question of relationships, having a baby and having to care for a baby, or maybe even 2 children, young children, it is important to have adult relationships. Because, doing the baby talk all day long, 24/7, every day, it can be stressful. It can be as if... might feel as if, oh, where's the next adult? I need to have an adult conversation. But like we said before, Miriam is in a position slowly, but she does question at one point her relationships. And she thinks about how her friends have a good interests at heart. Do they? Do they not? Is that also something that can happen when you have depression or psychosis? Not just having illusions and so on, or hallucinations or something like that, but also questioning your relationships?
I think there's also the question when you have a friend that you know for a very long time. Over time, the relationship changes. And if when you marry or you have children, how far does it change again?
Yeah, that's true. And like Miriam has her child-free friend Jack, who managed to stick with the friendship through through Miriam having now 2 children. And I think that is a testimony to a really good friendship, is when you're in completely different parts of your lives, but you still manage to remain close. And those friendships are lovely and wonderful. And I think a lot of people do talk about how after they have children, some of their friendships kind of drop off. Even people who are at similar stages in their lives, it's harder to maintain those friendships. And so what I feel about Miriam's friendships is that they've kind of weathered the storm of life changes, and some of them having children, some of them not, and marriages and divorces, and they've come out the other side, and these are her kind of core friendships now, particularly the women that she's friends with, and because they've been friends since school. And I think, to answer your question about kind of the impact of mental health on friendships, I do think that particularly with depression, it can play tricks on your brain and make you feel a lot more isolated than you actually are. And certainly I do feel that that's there for Miriam, and kind of when she's talking in her mind about, when she's talking to herself about who she could confide in, who she could talk to, and she kind of talks herself out of anybody. She's like, I can't talk to this person because of this, I can't call my mum because of this, and then she's managed to completely cut herself off, but it's all in her head, and those people are still there for her. They turn up on the page when they're needed, but she's decided that they're not options for her to ask for help from.
There's also the question with friendships, also in your book, if those friends suddenly decide to take sides. Do they take sides? I mean, sometimes friends tend to. Then the question is, are they real friends? Especially, like you said, you have been friends with someone since school, and suddenly they question you, they question your motives, or they take the other side. Of course, you start to question your friendships, and it is a scary thing when you feel as if people you've known all your life suddenly question you, and you would hope they would support you.
But sometimes they have to question you.
Indeed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like, if, say, for instance, if you had a friend who had an addiction problem and you knew that they needed help, and you might consider staging an intervention and like trying to help, to encourage them to get help when they wouldn't accept that they needed it. And I think there's an element of that going on in the baby monitor with Miriam, where her friends may have the absolute best intentions for helping her, but they don't feel that telling her that she's right. It's the cruel to be kind. Like, it's not necessarily always the kindest thing to tell your friend what they need to hear, and agree with them if stating the facts is something that they need to hear. And in the case of Miriam's friends, I think some of them felt that the tough love approach was needed to help her, that she needed to hear she needed help because she wasn't accepting it.
I think it's very difficult to find or see the point as a friend, or if you're personally affected, when it's unhealthy, when it starts to get unhealthy and the person needs help. And how far is just regular behavior?
How far is what, sorry?
How far is it more or less healthy behavior, and when does it become unhealthy so that one should do an intervention or say something?
Yeah. And I think with Miriam, they definitely pick a point where her behavior has got to the stage where, like, they're concerned about her health and also the safety of the children. And it's not necessarily their concern is their concern in the right place? Is it misplaced? Are they being led to believe that they need to be more concerned? Is someone leading them to believe that their concern is needed in that area when actually it isn't? What's behind that? There are questions that I definitely was kind of thinking in the background as I wrote the book.
Do you think it's easier to intervene as a friend when children are involved than otherwise?
Yeah, I think that's probably quite a good way of looking at it is like an individual person has the right to kind of mess up their own life, but if there's the safety of a child involved, I think it does become a different question and something that needs like more rapid attention than if there wasn't a child involved.
And what about the question of the support of your family? I mean, we mentioned that neither Jeremy nor Miriam truly have the immediate family to support them really. I mean, her mother is,
Her mother.
her mother. But how important is that when you have children, and how to cope with all the things you have to cope when you have a child or more than one child? Not just friends, but the immediate family. And has that changed, sorry to interrupt, but has that changed in the last, let's say, 20 years, since so many people who are grandparents still work and are not retired yet? I mean, given in my case, my grandmother was at home, and my mother could go back to work when I was not even a year.
And it's also combined with people moving farther away.
Definitely. Yeah. Because I was about to say, like, my husband's from California, so he's living 5,000 miles away from his immediate family. So like my daughter's grandparents on that side are in California. And then my parents live down in northern England. So they're a couple of hours away on the train, 4 or 5 hours driving. And so certainly like immediate family, I think there are a lot of people now who find that they don't have a member of the family around the corner who can just pop in and help, or can kind of offer a bit of childcare for a couple of hours and things like that. And the friends that I have who do have immediate family around the corner, I'm very jealous of. And like, I ask questions like, how did you get time to go to the gym? How do you do that? And like, oh, my mum came around. I'm like, oh, that must be really nice. And so, yeah, I think it is a lot more common now for people not to have immediate family. That are quite a lot, not immediate family to help out with kind of childcare and kind of in the immediate days in early childcare when the baby's first born. But there are a lot of people still that do have access to that. And I think people say like it takes a village about raising children. And I think a lot of people now are finding that they have to find their own village and kind of build a village because they've left their village a couple of 100 miles away.
But
as far as I hear from colleagues and so on, it makes it much more difficult if you don't have, for example, grandparents around that can look after the children and do.
I think yeah, and like finding a babysitter, for instance, so that the parents can go out for a couple of hours is a challenge, and especially if you're kind of just moved to an area or something like that. And I think Miriam and Jeremy, they don't have immediate family that can come and help out, and so they're kind of quite isolated, I think. And Miriam has friends who can come and look after their daughter Olivia while they're in the hospital to have Samuel, which is really good and nice. And so they've got this kind of balance. But certainly, I think the kind of, would this story have happened if Miriam and Jeremy had 2 sets of grandparents around the corner? Is another question. I don't, probably not. So maybe it is a very modern story for modern family shapes.
But
true.
It's still good because the technology is there and depression can happen regardless of who's around.
Exactly.
So maybe in a different form, but still.
Yeah, and I mean, grandparents still can be scary, can't they not?
And they can be overbearing, so.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a fine line. I think grandparents also have to walk a fine line between being helpful and being, like you said, overbearing, don't they?
Yes, I think they probably do. And I think there's all different types of people have all different kind of approaches to things. And I think what is interesting, and it's not really explored in the book, is the way that grandparents can be quite different grandparents to how they were as parents. And like I remember hearing stories about kind of very strict parents who then, as soon as they become grandparents, they're just like dote on their grandchildren, and there's no rules, and that's really, it's quite nice for the grandchildren to experience that. But the parents just say things like, "No, why were you ever like that with me?" You know?
Because they're only there for the fun.
Yep.
Yes, definitely.
Absolutely. And you can hand the children back.
Mm-hmm.
That's always
whenever they get too much of a handful.
Indeed. It's like being an aunt or an uncle. Just was nice having you here, but bye-bye.
Yeah, fill them up on sugar, get them all hyper, and then send them home.
Yes, exactly. And you have to deal with it. Do you think how would have ended it if the technology wasn't there to make that happen? How would have turned the book out if it wasn't there, all this technology?
That's a good question. I think about books like The Yellow Wallpaper, where kind of she feels like she's going absolutely insane. And I think there are a lot of stories that take place before the technology exists of people trying to kind of send other people a little bit mad, like the film Gaslight, which originated the phrase gaslighting. And they were like, the man was like fiddling around with the lights, wasn't he? So that the woman felt that she didn't have a proper grasp on reality. And I think humans have been finding ways to mess with each other for longer than the internet and electricity has been around. And I think there'd always be a way for somebody to mess with Miriam, even if this book was set in the 1920s.
But it makes it easier, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, I think, and there's a lot more ways to do it as well. I think there were quite a few different things that I explored in the book for things that could have happened to Miriam that didn't, that some of which involved technology and some of which didn't. And just like in the book, actually, there are some things that happened to Miriam that aren't technologically motivated. I can't say anything without giving away stories. Yeah, it's a mixture, isn't it, of using technology to kind of to observe and to survey her, but also to mess with her at the same time. And so they're in gathering information, but also having an impact as well. And I think the combination is the impactful part of it.
Yeah, true. Was she an easy pick?
Was she an easy pick?
Yeah, because of her past. Was it easy to do that to her? Was it easier to do that to her?
Yes, I think so. I don't think Miriam would have been selected for this had her past not have happened as it did.
Mm-hmm.
I think the fear of postnatal psychosis reappearing must be so intense for somebody that's experienced that. And I think, and there's the person who's kind of looking at their second pregnancy and thinking, is this going to happen again? How do I, and the questions that must go through their head, how do we prepare in advance to avoid this happening? What did we do last time that maybe triggered this happening? And asking those questions throughout, and then how do we know if it's about to happen, and what do we do if we see the signs, and all those questions. And I think in my mind Miriam was asking those for the duration of the pregnancy, and because I think a sensible person would be if they'd gone through that before. And there's a reason why there's such a big age gap between Olivia and the new baby Samuel, is because I suspect if you've gone through postnatal psychosis that's that intense, I suspect you really have to think hard about going through another pregnancy.
But if you start to question everything you do and feel, it can drive you crazy.
Yes, and there's never a right time to do things like have a baby, and it's never convenient, and things like that, and there has to be a kind of well, what does the family what does Miriam's family look like that she wants to have? And I suspect that that second baby was very much wanted and fit with the family shape that she wanted for her to go through that again. And I think she probably talked it through a lot with both her husband and her friends, and planted that seed, because she probably gave them the idea.
I'm also wondering if the current situation in the UK with all the prices going up, you mentioned it in your book. I mean, it's hard when you have two children and the reason why Jeremy takes the new job is also because, we have 2 children now. Wouldn't it be better if I took the new position? And on the other hand, I will be away from home a lot. This also would have changed the dynamic. It would have been harder to put her in the position she was then in the course of the book. But I mean, it's also a reality, isn't it, at the moment in the UK, not just in the UK, but other countries as well, that the question of money and how to cope with everything is also a big question mark on families and what to do and having another child.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. It's and things like hand-me-downs and kind of buying things secondhand, and like part of that question could be like, where did the baby monitor come from? Because and how did it get into the house? And I think part of that probably is linked with the kind of being frugal and things like, I'm sure that there would have been a lot of gifted items from friends that had already had their kids, just like handing things over and like gifts to say congratulations for the new baby. And so there's this ambiguity about how this baby monitor got into the house in the first place because of that, because they're not buying new stuff, and because before Jeremy gets his new job, they're maybe not that financially secure, and Miriam's like planning to go back to work herself as soon as maternity leave's over, because they need 2 incomes coming in.
That makes it easier, indeed. And Rosie, after this scary book, I mean, you write scary books, let's be honest here for a minute.
Just for fun.
Yeah, exactly. What can we look forward to in case of more scary books from you?
I have another scary book coming out at the beginning of May. It's called Ex-Girlfriend. And it's about a family who go to a remote Scottish hunting lodge in the Scottish Highlands for Christmas. And they get to this house and they're unpacking their bags and they're kind of getting ready to celebrate Christmas together. And the doorbell rings. And when the main character, Sadie, goes to open the door, standing on the doorstep is her husband's ex-girlfriend. And she just says, "Hi, stranger," and pushes past Sadie and walks into the house to give the husband a massive hug, and then she will not leave. And the question is, what does she want, and why is she there, and why won't she leave? And how does she know they were there?
And will they all survive?
Yeah, and will they all survive?
Probably not. And maybe she only leaves feet first. But who will take care of that? Oh dear. So it's more or less a sort of locked room mystery in the Scottish Highlands.
Yes, because there's obviously a big storm and a power cut and no one can leave, and of course, yes. And it's Christmas, the perfect book for you, Teacup. Everything to do. Do you like Christmas books?
She most certainly does. I mean, I
like
like a good story. Never mind Christmas, Easter, or whenever.
Yeah, true, but around Christmas, it's nice to read a Christmas book.
Yeah, with lots of murder in it.
Doesn't matter.
Or maybe not murder, just messing with your mind again, I suppose.
I'm not going to answer that.
We have to read it, and we will. Most definitely, we will. Rosie, is there anything else you would like our listeners to know?
Just that the baby monitor is available to buy now. It is if you haven't given away too much of the plot. I wasn't really aware of spoilers while we were talking, so I've probably given away the whole thing. But
think
it's
so.
Creepy and spooky and lots of what's true and what's not. And yeah, it's available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook.
Perfect. I don't think we've given too much away.
No.
Read it, people. It's scary as hell. And we're not just talking about baby monitors, because like we said at the beginning, there's a lot of creepy stuff out there.
It makes you think.
Yeah. And thank goodness it does make you think. Coming up with new technology.
What are books for?
That's what books are for, exactly. Maybe not question your friends like our main character does in the book, but she has every reason to question not herself, but everyone else around her.
And herself.
Yes.
Who can you trust? Can you even trust yourself?
Exactly. That is that is even scarier, is it? When you feel as if you can't even trust yourself.
Definitely. I think that's probably the scariest part of the book. Well, one of the scariest parts of the book is that Miriam doesn't know if she's perceiving everything accurately or not, and whether what's happening is real.
Yep.
And who she can trust, if she can trust herself, if she can trust her friends, if she can trust her husband. Yeah, I think that's she's very alone.
Yeah, I suppose that's one of the most scariest parts of having a mental illness, the special form of mental illness, where you feel as if you can't even trust yourself and you don't know what's true or what isn't true. And did I do that? Did I not do that?
But if you realize that, you can get help. If you don't, it's worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that completely.
Anything else you would like to share, Rosie?
No, I think that is everything.
Splendid. Then we would like to thank you for joining us for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you for having me, and your questions were brilliant. It's been such a nice chat.
You did enjoy this episode as much as we did? Then hit subscribe and don't miss the next episode. Also, make sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. If you like to support us and buy us a coffee, you can do so via Buy Me a Coffee and other platforms. You can find all the necessary links in the description. Until next time.